All right, this is the meeting, Kubernetes CSI implementation meeting, and today is October 19, 2018, Friday. First up, we're going to go over one of the items that we're working on for this quarter. The task is moving CSI RBAC role definitions from Kubernetes to external repos. Patrick, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, just have to find the unmute button first. So the idea was long-term to have RBAC rules defined in YAML manifests in all of the different sidecar containers, and then just do a verbatim copy of those individual fragments wherever they are needed, in the Docker repository, into the end-to-end test repository, and replace the current situation where we have specific code handcrafted to set up those rules with the same set of manifest files. And I have one open pull request where I'm doing that change. I've first had to add some infrastructure to actually load arbitrary RBAC manifest files, but that's all in place. What's currently giving me a lot of heartache and trouble is one particular setup, one particular job in the end-to-end testing on GCE, because it runs with what I learned is pod security policy. You apparently have to bind your service account to a special user. There's a role binding for that. It was done previously for the GCE persistent disk test, and only for that. So I see how that test worked, and I made it work again in my pull request by just creating additional role binding. What completely confuses me is how the generic host path test could have worked before. It did, it ran, it succeeded, and now it no longer does because I'm apparently missing these additional privileges. And I just don't understand that part. I don't understand how it worked before, because obviously it did, but I don't know why and how I can replicate that, because the solution of binding the service account to this one PSP end-to-end thing that just is a very specific thing for that cluster, as far as I understand it, that doesn't sound right. So I need help. I think David Su was very active. He was the one who added this role binding before.
Okay.
So he probably knows, but I've not been able to get hold of him the last 2 days, I think.
Got it. Okay.
So if anyone has some advice on that, that would help me get this pull request in a suitable shape.
Could you paste the link for the pull request here?
It should be in the document.
Oh,
are you looking at the revised implementation meeting minutes?
I believe so. Maybe it got moved around somewhere. Maybe
it is in the meeting. It's at least in the document that I'm looking at right now under Q4 18 CSI tasks.
You're looking at Monday, Saad.
Oh. Whoops. Let me fix
Yeah, I added the link to this pull request for Wednesday, and I now added this new status update on being blocked. So it's all in the minutes. Yeah. I just wanted to draw attention to that because I'm currently stuck on that one.
Okay.
I've been experimenting with a few things, just trying to figure out why it didn't work and what might work. But this is now really just blind trial and error. And
okay. Yeah. So we'll get some folks to take a look at that, and hopefully we could get that clarified. One question for you is, ultimately what I expect is that the drivers are going to install the RBAC rules as part of their deployment process.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then the only thing the end-to-end test should do is figure out how to deploy the driver, and the driver should figure out how to deploy the RBAC rules and bindings.
Yeah, but the driver the deployment has to happen first, including the RBAC rules. Otherwise, the driver never runs.
Otherwise, the driver never runs.
So the CSI driver, it can't trigger the deployment. The deployment has to be done by the admin first, and then the driver runs eventually. But but it might not even know that it's Kubernetes, and it doesn't know how the admin wanted it to be deployed, because there are multiple options.
For example, today, if we want an end-to-end test to run the GCPD CSI driver, it will, kubectl create F, I think, the YAML files for deploying on Kubernetes that driver.
Roughly, it wasn't using kubectl because we don't know whether kubectl is available. It was using the API directly, with some utility code to load a YAML file. And I fixed that. That was part of the end-to-end framework. There was a manifest package that could load one entity from a file. I've extended that a bit because we had also these issues with. I have one test who needs to create that, and I have another test who needs the same entity. How can they do that without conflicting with each other? Because they both need a service account with a certain name. Well, service account is a bad example. It's namespaced, but the cluster roles are not namespaced, so they have to be unique in the cluster. Otherwise, we have conflicts between different tests if they happen to collide on that name.
I see.
So what my utility code now does is it loads the YAML file, it renames the entities, it basically injects the unique generated part that is also part of a namespace, and attaches that to the global entities. You get per test service account, per test cluster roles, all of that set up automatically. But from the original YAML file that was shipped, for example, with CSI with the CSI external provisioner. So that's the difference compared to before. But you're right, long term, that and will lead us to a situation where we want to be, where running a test against a new driver is just basically specifying the set of YAML files that need to be deployed.
So then I guess the challenge is going to be, if we want to move to that model and I am a driver author and I need to, I'm going to copy the RBAC YAML file from the sidecar container repo to my deployment YAMLs. The problem is that if the names of those bindings are identical to some other driver and some other driver is pre-installed, there's a collision.
Real deployments do have that exact same problem. They basically have to modify the names of these entities as part of copying the original YAML files. But that can be as simple as a simple name replacement, replacing, say, CSI. I don't know. Well, it depends a bit on what entities we're talking about. The cluster, if all was namespace, it would be simple. It's the cluster roles which aren't.
Right.
But both basically need to be renamed as part of a specific deployment.
Yep. That makes sense. So if that is the ultimate long-term goal, and like real deployments are going to need to do this renaming anyway, why should we have special code to handle this in end-to-end tests? Why not?
Because we want to have the same test be run in parallel. That means we need to generate a unique random number, basically, because we can't hard code a name in the test or in the manifest files.
So I think what you're saying is that we could have this even for the same driver, multiple different instances.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
okay.
The same, or perhaps not the same try, not exactly the same test, but the setup is the same. For example, for multiple tests using the same manifest file, and therefore it has to be renamed at runtime, test runtime.
Okay, that makes sense. Cool, good stuff. Okay, we'll get someone to take a look at that. Hopefully, David can help answer the outstanding question there. Thank you for all your work here. All right, let's move on. Is there anything else you wanted to discuss, Patrick? If not,
no, but that has been keeping me busy enough.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Patrick. All right, let's jump to the 1.12 release plan. So I believe the 0.41 of the various containers has been cut. Does anybody have the latest updates on this? I know Luis is not on the line. but we can take a look. So 0.41 for driver registrar is there.
Provisioner has been cut.
Provisioner has been cut as well?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So I think next steps here are to update the end-to-end tests and make sure everything works with the new sidecar containers. And then for our sidecar containers for the GC or for this any CSI drivers that we have, we should update to use the new sidecar containers. So if you are a developer for any CSI driver, please update and pick up the latest 0.4 set of sidecar containers, test them with the 1.12 release, make sure everything is working. If it's not, let's file bugs and figure out what's wrong. So this looks like it's all green.
One thing I realized about the E2E test is that if we want to update the image version, we got to do it in like multiple places. There's one in the test source code itself, which host path uses to version its images.
Okay.
And then the CPD driver also has its own like test manifest that basically the versions are specified in line in the YAMLs themselves. And so we got to update that too, something to watch out for.
Sorry, so the first place was the end-to-end test sidecar container versions. That makes sense.
So both of these are for end-to-end tests.
Okay.
Is that for host path driver, it seems like the version is set dynamically in the source code, the E2E test source code. Whereas for GCPD driver, it's set in the manifest file.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then GCPD. Okay. So for the second one, maybe we can get David to help out with that. And then hopefully Patrick can update the first one and we'll get some mileage on it.
I might also just end up updating the GCPD ones for topology tests.
Awesome. That would be great.
Yeah.
Cool. Next up, let's go over the items that we have for Q4. First up is Jan's PRs. I don't see him on the line, so we'll skip over that. Next up is kubelet device registration mechanism. Vlad's not here today either, so let's skip over that.
Just real quick. Yeah, okay. That's the item I was looking for. Just wanted to make sure.
So this was something Michelle brought up yesterday with Chang. We need to implement the CSI kubelet plugin deregistration callback. Hopefully Vlad can pick this up. I'll discuss this with him on Slack and see if, make sure it's on his radar. CRD installation mechanism, I apologize, I still don't have a PR out for this. Stay tuned is the best I can say at this point. Next up is the CSI external provisioner topology updates. I think there's a PR already out for the first item. Any other updates on this, Deep?
No, nothing much. So I think Cheng already took a look. He had some feedback. I addressed them, so the PR is up to date.
Cool.
Yeah, the other two are work in progress.
Perfect. Are you working on both at the same time, or is the work started?
Maybe the second one for now.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and mark that as in progress. Then CSI entry driver is being moved. We'll get an update from Jan on Monday, hopefully. Moving CSI to 1.0. No other updates since the community meeting on Wednesday. One reminder is if you haven't signed the CLA, please do that and get that returned to me. If you are a contributor to the container storage interface, I think Deep, you're going to need to get that signed for your Docker.
Yeah. I contacted legal and they're on it.
All right, perfect.
And one more thing about CSI Spec. There are some changes that we want to around topology that we want to try to push for. Again, Jordan, after Jordan is taking a look at the self-labeling mechanism in topology, he's raised some concerns, and he's pushing for basically a controller level call for getting topology keys. If we can get that in for 1.0, that would be awesome. And given that it's a spec change and code freeze is just a month away, I will definitely focus on this first, make sure that goes through.
Okay. That is a good call out. Thank you for that, Cheng.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and get an issue created. If you can ping that to me, I'll put the 1.0 milestone on there.
Okay, yeah. There's an existing issue. It's just that we decided, yeah.
Okay, just ping me the issue and then I'll mark it 1.0 and then we'll push hard on it then.
Yep, and then the other thing to be aware of is there are some minor spec changes. I think you already talked to the rest of the CSI community about it, about the reversing of the domain name and things like that.
Yeah, they seem pretty receptive about those things, so we're looking good there.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Thanks.
Cool. Next up is moving CSI RBAC role definitions, which we just got an update from Patrick. And then ideally, I want Luis to split out the driver registrar into two separate repos, that separate one for cluster driver registrar and node driver registrar. I want this work to get started sooner rather than later, so I'm going to ping Luis on that. And then documentation, this is a call out for everyone. This product and project is very complicated. If you're not deeply involved with the development of it, it can be daunting to try to understand how do I get my CSI driver running. So we need to do a much, much better job of documenting from a developer perspective what somebody needs to do to get their driver running, capture the breaking changes between different releases, things like that. So if you have any small issue that you run into, please just throw out a PR against Kubernetes-CSI documentation, let's continue to improve it. Every little change will help, so don't feel like you have to do all of it. If there's any little small area that you can improve, that's good enough. Let's get started somewhere. And then that is it. We've got snapshots in progress. Shing, do you want to give an update on this?
Yeah, sure. So I'm working on the finalize on the volume when prevent volume from being deleted when there's a snapshot being created from it. And also Jing and I are working on the design for a group snapshot. We think we probably still need to have a new API object called group snapshot, and then we can have a pod or even something else, maybe a stateful set or even a list of pods as a source. So we're still looking into the design, and we'll discuss about that again in next week's design meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds good to me. And then implementing CSI pod inline volume support. Vlad says he's working on that. CSI, sorry, did someone have a comment on that? Okay, next up is CSI migration. David and Deep are working very intensely on this. There's already a PR out for integrating this translation library with Kubernetes. Deep, do you want to give any other status update there?
Yeah, so the first PR around attach detach is out, and that's been reviewed. I had some questions on it, so we'll close on it on the PR. And then the second stage is like getting the external provisioner changes in, and And there's also work being done on the EBS CSI driver side from Chang from AWS to get the translation stuff set up for EBS.
Awesome. That's excellent progress. I know David is heads down on that, so it is looking good. That is all that I have in terms of status updates today. Any miscellaneous updates, anything anybody wants to talk about? Okay. And going forward, I've also tapped Michelle from my team to help out with this project. I know it's a very tight deadline, and Michelle's a superstar, so we can certainly use her help. I want to make sure that we are able to land the CSI 1.0 and get all the Kubernetes changes and the sidecar changes that we want in time. So Michelle's going to be helping out a lot more. I'm probably going to hand over running this meeting to her, probably beginning in the middle of the next week. I'm going to remain engaged, but I'll let her kind of manage the project management aspect of this. And we'll go from there. The goal is to land this for this quarter. And that is all that I have. Anything else? All right, then we will reconvene on Monday. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.